Good morning. Today we're going to talk about coaching white men. I do a lot of my work with white men where I get called in to help someone who has a blind spot, especially around the issues of leadership, and now they've become issues of equity and inclusion. So I want to talk a little bit about what it looks like from my perspective when I meet a client like that and how I work with them. And typically, a person like that has grown up in the organization, or sometimes they come into a new organization after having been someplace for a long time. So they grew up in one place where they only knew one way of doing things. They usually were mentored by a person when they started who taught them to do things in a certain way, back maybe in the 90s when things were different and one acted in a different way in an organization. And when they grew up, as they grew and grew and grew, the wake that they made with the way that they were became bigger and bigger. And now they're at the senior vice president level, sometimes managing director. And so they don't know that the kinds of things they do and the kinds of things they say land with other people in an offensive way. They actually don't, even though hearing the issues make it pretty obvious to me that there's a problem. They were never told. And so the person who mentored them usually did it worse. They have tried to groom themselves a little bit. Maybe they were given feedback at some point along the way. And it's nothing that they do that's so egregious as to get them fired. So it's not like someone who's discriminating or doing something really bad. But it could be a joke. It could be a tone of voice issue. It could be that someone respects one person more and one person less and shows it. It could be there are lots of ways that a person in power who's unaware shows up to other people as being less than a leader. So this person grows up. They see that they don't see that their wake is getting bigger, although other people are affected by the way they are. In the meantime, the organization moves away from them because the organizational values have shifted, or they're in a new organization and that organization has a different value set. And so now they get in trouble because what they're doing is no longer supported by the organization. And so that's how I usually find them. I usually find them defensive, confused. They say, how come it's me? It's why me? The other person is doing it far worse. They're not in trouble. And who knows, maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But they feel defensive and they feel like they don't understand what's happening. They're doing nothing different than they did before, except now it's wrong. And in fact, it is. But they don't really get the memo. And no one told them that starting today, you're not supposed to do these things. So that's how I find them. And so the first thing I have to do is listen to their story and really understand where they're coming from, what their perspective is. And from hearing their story, I have a sense of what it must be like to be listening to them, to be working with them, and I'm able to give them some feedback, but it's too early to do that. And so what I want to do with that is first understand where they're coming from, and then build some trust so that usually they inherit me. So I have to give them a sense of trust, that I'm not out to get them, I'm not out to judge them, that I'm actually on their side. My job is to help them become more effective. And so after a while, after we reach that, then my job changes and it becomes about holding up a mirror to them to show them the impact of what they do, what they say, how they behave, etc. Sometimes there are very fine points. Sometimes it has to do with the way someone looks and the change in their face, the roll of their eyes that they may not be aware of. Sometimes it's things they say to me, and I ask them would you say that to someone else? And we have that's a conversation that happens. So there are lots of ways that I can hold up a mirror to them. And when I do, sometimes they're very appreciative. Sometimes they feel actually a great deal of shame and embarrassment. And sometimes they get really defensive. And I have to be able to sit there and be able to take it. And that's my job, is to let them process all of that, because this is a big shift for them in their psyche. But on the other side of that, we can talk about behavior change, and we can talk about how they actually can try different behaviors, maybe get feedback from some of these people that who accuse them of offending them, maybe do other things where they can sort of test to see how their behaviors can change. And they get feedback, and then we come back and we discuss it, and over time, I've seen miracles happen where someone who's very defensive at first becomes, gets a really understanding of what's happening and becomes an agent for change. And so the good story of that is when they come on the other side of their ego defensiveness and when they understand how they may have impacted other people, they become very enthusiastic proponents for change. And then they encourage people to see them as mentors and see them as agents for change, because they can have a conversation with their buddies and say, oh yeah, I went through this. You probably don't want to do that. You want to do something else. So that's the sort of the best case of the work. And when it happens, it's very rewarding and very fulfilling. So if you are a person like that and you hear me describe this and say, maybe that's me, definitely get in touch with me. If you have a person in your organization who is like that, for sure, get in touch. And if you're a person who has been impacted by a person like that, who's totally clueless and unaware, let me know. And maybe there's a way in which I can be helpful and help you to talk to them in a way that they can understand. Thank you very much. I hope this work continues, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.